To begin your knit headband project, you're going to need 2 pieces of knit fabric. It could be 2 or 4-way stretch, and you're also going to need a pattern. With right sides together, fold your fabric in half on the grain line, and then make sure that the cut one on fold line on your pattern is facing on the fold of your fabric. You'll mark the 3 sides of the pattern onto the fabric with small strokes using your chalk, and then you can cut the fabric on those lines. Note, you should only be cutting 3 lines. That center line should stay intact because we're cutting one on the fold. Make sure that your fabric is correct directionally so that the greatest degree of stretch is going lengthwise. And also make sure that you aren't cutting your fabric upside down so that you don't have spooky upside down houses. Next, you'll take the second piece of fabric, and I always like to mark on the wrong side of the fabric so that if I make a mistake, I don't see that on the outside of my work. Again, trace around your fabric, making sure that you're cutting one on the fold, which means that you don't cut on that fold. And then you'll cut the 2 or 3 lines depending on whether or not your top edge is straight. Now with right sides together, you're going to lay the 2 pieces of fabric on top of each other, and you're going to serge the top edge and then the bottom curved edge. First, start with that top edge, making sure that the 2 edges are aligned so that you're catching all of the seam. If you need to cut off a little bit of fabric, that's okay. And then you'll go to the curved edge. Make sure that you're smoothing the fabric as you stitch it. And when you're serging on that curve, it's okay if you want to cut off just a little bit of the seam so that you make sure you're catching both sides of the fabric. After you've clipped your threads, you're going to turn the piece right side out. And then you can check and make sure that you caught all of the edges. If you didn't, turn it right back inside out and serge over those areas that didn't get caught. Next, you're going to fold the fabric on top of itself so that the 2 right sides are touching and the seams are matching up. Make sure that those 2 seams are lined up just right. And now we're going to serge that small tube, but we need to leave a little opening. So start by serging a little bit away from one of the sets of seams. And then you're going to serge in a tube. And you have to do this in slow passes, kind of adjusting the fabric as you go because the length of the presser foot on the serger is quite long. Last, you will serge until you get past the 2 edges that you have not serged on yet. And then you're going to chain off and clip your threads. You should now have a small, about 1-inch opening. Next, you're going to pull your fabric through that opening so that the right side of the fabric is showing. After this, you'll want to make sure that all of your curves are pushed out. You might have to fuss with this for a little bit. And then you can grab a hand sewing needle and thread, or you're welcome to top stitch this on a machine. I'm going to tie a knot around the edge of my silamide thread, and then I'm going to hide that knot by putting my needle back a little ways behind the seam that I'm going to be stitching to make sure that the knot is secure in the fabric. And then I'm going to be folding over one edge on top of the other to secure that raw edge. Now you'll perform a slip stitch where you'll take a small bite of fabric off of one side of the seam, and then you'll go in the tunnel of the fold of the fabric on the other side. So I'm taking a small bite, and then I'm going to go through a little bit of the tunnel on the fold, and then I'll pull that stitch through. So if you don't want to hand sew this, what you can do is make it so that both edges of the seam are folded together, and then you can take this over to your sewing machine, and just with those 2 layers together, you can top stitch them. So that is an option that you can do as well, but if you want this to be reversible and look nice either way, you can do this hand stitching. Once you get to the end of your hand sewing, you are going to put the needle through the fabric, but don't pull it all the way through. And then you're going to wrap the thread around the needle 2 times. So I'm putting the needle through the fabric, and then I'm going to wrap the thread around the needle 2 or 3 times and pull that through to create a nice knot. You can do this one more time if you want to be sure that it's secure, and then pull the tail through to hide, and you have now completed a knit headband.